you would like to answer. What do you think is the difference between religious and spiritual? Is there a difference? If there is, what do you think is the difference? If there's no difference, why do you think there's no difference? So basically, I would like to know your thoughts before I start speaking something based on the Gita. Would anyone like to share something?
I'll try.
Yes, Bree, please.
My understanding of religion is stepping stones in which you can be introduced to God or to build a relationship with Him. And spiritual is the act of devotional service to God.
So religion is developing the relationship, and spiritual is actually having that emotion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in a way.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's a good point. I'll come back and elaborate on it soon. Anyone else? So we could say religion is is part of the process, and spirituality is the result in one sense. What you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes. Anyone else?
Maybe it's a good point or a good time. Maybe Lane and Miguel. And maybe Mackay. I'm not sure if Mackay introduced himself.
Well, I think he met Prabhu on Tuesday, right?
Oh.
So that's why. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, maybe Miguel and Lane, if you could. So they are part of our regular reading group. I don't know. I don't want me to put you on the spot, but maybe if you want to say something and also just say like one line about yourself, just introduce yourself. That might be useful.
Yeah. Yesterday evening, Miguel met Prabhu.
Yeah, we met. Okay, perfect. That's
but let him introduce. That's fine. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhus, thank you for Chaitanya Charan. Thank you for your association once again. Just something really quick about myself. I've been on the path for about a year and 2 months, a year and 3 months, and it's radically changed my life. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Wonderful. Happy to hear this.
As I was thinking about the question, I think religion is maybe it's more tied to almost like your surface level functional identity, whereas spiritual or being spiritual goes a lot deeper. It's like who you truly are, your fundamental identity. Just some thoughts.
Yes, that's a fair point. So religion is a little more superficial, spirituality is a little deeper.
Yes.
Agreed. That's true. Thank you, Miguel. Anyone else? Maybe one more? Of course, more are welcome also.
Elaine, you want to do a quick intro and see if you can answer?
Hare Krishna. It's nice to meet you. I'm sorry. I just literally walked in my house from work, so I didn't hear your question.
Okay. So the question was that, is there a difference between science and spirituality, you feel? So not science, religion and spirituality?
Yes.
You can think about it.
Religion. I don't know. Religion seems like can spin it to however they want others to follow. Maybe not so much with in like the moral standing. Spirituality seems more inclusive and opening.
Good point. Yeah. So religion can often be a tool for people to manipulate others, to get them to do what they want, whereas spirituality is more universal, more inclusive. Yes, that's true. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll start with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This is 9.2, where Krishna says, Rajya Vidya Rajaguhyam Pavitram Idamuttamam Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam Susukham kartum avyayam. So he says that the knowledge I'm going to describe, it is the highest of knowledge. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. Interestingly, he also said this is confidential. And I'll talk about this concept of confidentiality shortly. But he says it is confidential. And then Pavitram idam uttamam. He says this is very pure, this is very uplifting. And idam uttamam. And it is an elevated form of knowledge. Then the key part is pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam. This is something which you can directly realize by experience. Okay. I'm trying to share screen and he's saying that screen sharing has failed. Okay, let's try this. So pratyakshavagaman dharmyam susukham kartum avyayam. We can realize it by our experience. What is being taught is not just some dogma. It is something which we can realize by experience. And susukham kartum avyayam. It's joyfully performed. So in this, we could say that there are two aspects that are being talked about. There's the knowledge, the philosophical or the intellectual aspect, and then there is the experiential or the transformational aspect. So both of these are important. Traditionally, religion has been associated with two things: what we believe and what we do. There are dogmas and there are rituals. And these two often lead to sectarianism. Why? Because one particular religion might have one set of dogmas, another religion may have another set of dogmas. And sometimes those dogmas can not only conflict, but conflict violently. So that is one cause of conflict. Once there was a Catholic nun. She was in charge of an orphanage. She was taking care of young girls. And as those girls were coming into their teenage and growing toward youth, she asked the girls, what do you want to become after you grow up? So different girls gave different answers. Now one of the girls, she said that, I want to become a prostitute. I said, what? What did you say? He said, I want to become a prostitute. Oh, thank God. I thought you said you wanted to become a Protestant. So what happens over here is that somebody, now this is not a barb against Christianity. This is something which every religious tradition has its own dogmatism, where somebody going out of that dogmatic belief system is seen to be the worst possible fate that could be there for that person. So the idea is often religion leads to narrow-mindedness because there are dogmas and there are rituals. If your dogmas are, your beliefs are different from mine, if your rituals are different from mine, then you're not only wrong, you are wrong-headed. Not only wrong-headed, you are evil. So this is where sectarianism comes in. Now, on the other hand, what spirituality is about is, if we consider there are beliefs and there are rituals, but both beliefs and rituals are ultimately meant to lead to experiences. And it is those experiences that transform. Bhakti pareshanubhava viraktiranyatra cha. It is said that bhakti gives us experience of the divine. Para isha anubhav. And when you get that experience of the divine, it is at that time that we find it so captivating, so fulfilling, so enriching, that we just want it more. That we feel that nothing in the world compares with this. That aspiring for anything else apart from this inner fulfillment is actually an underutilization of my power to aspire. And in that way, one starts becoming spiritually purposeful, spiritually progressive, and one starts savoring the spiritual experience more and more. So the idea of spirituality as fulfilling the purpose. So the idea of beliefs which are involved in philosophy and the idea of rituals which are involved in religion, that's not wrong in itself. But when they themselves become the essence, instead of being a means to something else, that is when the problem starts coming. So spirituality, yes, we need to have certain understanding of what is going on in life. We need to have certain worldview, and that worldview is helpful. And some worldviews are helpful for our spirituality, some may not be that helpful. Let's see if I can share this screen, not this one. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So in one sense, spirituality is a science. It's like a science. So if we consider it's a higher dimensional science, in science there is theory and experiment. The theoretical part of science proposes. Maybe this is like when Newton saw an apple falling, he proposed, yeah, maybe there is a force of gravity. And then there are experiments. Okay, if there were a force of gravity, it's not just an apple, various other objects would also fall. And not just here in UK, all over the world they would fall. And when that happens, then we can say that, okay, this particular theory is a scientific theory now. It's well established. So just as in science, there is an intellectual aspect, a propositional aspect, and then there is a practical aspect. So similarly, in spirituality, there is philosophy and there is religion. So philosophy offers us propositions about reality. What is the nature of reality? In science also there are propositions, but usually scientific propositions focus more on the nature of material reality, what's happening within matter. But philosophy talks about the nature of all of reality. And then religion is meant to be a set of practices that enable a person to themselves realize or experience what the philosophy is talking about. So, and when both of these are done together, then spirituality delivers experiences. So we could say science, in the sense of modern science, is experimental, whereas spirituality is experiential. It's experiential. The experiences are something which are within our heart, within, we could say, the laboratory of our consciousness. And when we say that I want to be spiritual but not religious, what happens is that sometimes this religion part, it just becomes a set of rituals which are practiced without any purpose. Now here I have I earlier said religion has two parts, beliefs and practices. Now here I've talked about religion as separate from the intellectual part. The philosophy is one part. Why is that? Because for many people, when they come to religion, it's not with a philosophical approach. It's a more of a belief-oriented approach. There's not much reasoning. The difference between philosophy and belief system is that philosophy is based on reasoning about the nature of reality, whereas belief systems are based on acceptance. This is how it is. So religion does not necessarily, or at least religion as it is presented in the common to most people, as it is understood by most people, is primarily a set of practices, and along with that there will be a set of beliefs also, but the reasoning part is not there. And many people get put off by this, because if, okay, this is what you believe, this is what you do. So much of we could say religion which is lost its spirituality can be described in 3 words: pray, pay, obey. Pray, okay, you come to a church, you come to a holy place, pray, and then you pay, give some donation, you tithing or whatever, and then whatever you're told, just do it, obey. Pray, pay, obey. And then what happens is, this is not particularly appealing. Okay, this just seems like was mentioned that it seems a way of controlling people. And then those who are not willing to be controlled, they are demonized. That's why religions often have derogatory names for those who don't belong to their group. Christians will call non-Christians as pagans. Muslims will call non-Muslims as kafirs. Like that, every religion has some pejorative label for those who do not belong to it. And when these pejorative labels, they are made the defining identity of those who are outside one's group, then religion results in a tribal mentality. So it is this, oh, I'm told to blindly believe, I'm told to blindly obey, that I don't want to. That kind of narrow-minded sectarian idea is what many people have in mind when they think of religion. They say, I don't want to be religious. On the other hand, when they say, I want to be spiritual, what they mean is, I want to find some meaning and purpose in life. I want to have some higher experiences. I want to try out meditation. I want to experience some deep fulfillment. So there's the openness to experience, openness to higher realities, openness to more refined emotions like compassion, non-judgmentality, forgiveness. All these are what are in people's mind when they talk about spirituality. So that's why many people feel, I want to be spiritual, but I don't want to be religious. I want to be spiritual, but not religious. So if that is the sense, okay, I want to be open-minded, not narrow-minded. I want to focus on experience, not just dogmas and rituals. That is good. In that sense, let's all be spiritual and not religious. At the same time, there is one challenge with this approach. And that is that spirituality is not just a state of mind. Spirituality is a state of being. What is the difference between a state of mind and a state of being? Can everyone mute themselves, please? Or those? So, state of mind is basically our emotions. Oh, when I go to this place, I feel peaceful. And if you go and feel peaceful, that's good. But our emotions, our mind states are fickle. So spirituality can change our state of mind. Spirituality can make us feel more peaceful, feel more centered, and that is good. But spirituality is more than that. It is not just experiencing a state of mind. It is actually, it is not just experiencing or experimenting, experiencing a state of mind. It is actually attaining the state of being. It is rising to higher consciousness. Another way to understand this is, let me see if I can quickly find that diagram. Yeah. So, if you can see the screen, we could say the bottom of the mountain is material consciousness.
Oh, Prabhu, we can't see your screen right now.
Oh, really?
Yes, not yet.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let me see.
No problem.
Okay, this is something different now. Yeah. So you can see the bottom of the mountain. Oh, it's not seeing a mountain here.
Yes, now we can see a mountain.
I can just see a path over here. Let's look at this.
Yes.
Let's put it here. So the bottom of the mountain is material consciousness. So the top of the mountain is spiritual consciousness. So in material consciousness, we are only aware of material things. Now, as soon as we see a person, all that we see is, okay, what kind of clothes is the person wearing? What kind of physique that they have? What kind of hairstyle do they have? But we barely go beyond the physique to see the actual person, see the character of the person. So that is, when material consciousness, we focus on externals. In spiritual consciousness, we start focusing on internals. We start focusing on higher realities, deeper aspects of our being. And this is a journey. This is a journey, and there could be different paths to this journey. So we could say different paths are like different religions. Each of them is one path up. So spirituality is inclusivistic. How is it inclusivistic? Because it understands that there may be many paths up, but that is not the key thing. Is one going up? So a person who is spiritual is attached more to purpose than path. It is that, okay, that person, some other person might be from some other tradition, but if they are actually centered, if they are forgiving, if they are compassionate, if they are focusing on deeper meaning and purpose of life, then that indicates they are on the spiritual journey. They are spiritually evolving. They may not necessarily have the same rituals that we have. They may not even have the same beliefs that we have, but they are evolving. So this is, so that's why I said spirituality is not just a state of mind. It is a state of being. State of being means that actually our consciousness has risen upward toward the top of the mountain. State of mind means sometimes, even if we are at the bottom of the mountain, that means we are mostly not just conscious of, but consumed with material things. Even then, we might very well sometimes feel very good, sometimes feel very peaceful, but that won't last for long. So spirituality is like going up the mountain. And the various paths that people may have for going up the mountain, they are like the religion. There is a philosophy in it, and then there is a religion in it. So when somebody says, I will be spiritual without being religious, that what it could mean is, yeah, I want to go to the top of the mountain, but I don't want to follow any path. Well, that will not work. We have to follow some path to get to the top of the mountain. It's not that we have to follow only one path. It's not that we are saying this is the only path. But the key thing is a path has to be followed. Now, whether we want to use the word religion for that or not, that's up to us. Because words acquire certain connotations in certain times. So even for 30, 40, 50 years ago, religion didn't have that much of a negative connotation. Einstein talked about the religious spirit of inquiry. He talked about the feeling of the deep religious experience one gets when one contemplates the magnificence of existence. I'm paraphrasing his quotes here. So he used the word religion and there was no negative connotation at that time. But today the word religion has a negative connotation. But either way, if we understand that spirituality is not just a state of mind, it's a state of being. That it's not just feeling good, but it's actually rising to a higher level of consciousness. Then I need a path to rise to that higher level of consciousness. And what will that path be? That path will be my religion, whether we use the word religion or not. So in that sense, if we want to evolve, we need to be spiritual and religious. So bhakti, to just round up this discussion, we can have a few questions after that. Bhakti is about the universal love of humanity for divinity. It is the aspiration of the human heart for loving something beyond the ordinary, something transcendent. And in that sense, bhakti is universal. So, bhakti is quintessentially spiritual. And bhakti transcends and we could say unifies the various world's traditions. Because bhakti is about that aspiration to love the divine. So, in that sense, it's spiritual. It's not religious in the sense that it's not narrow minded. It doesn't say that, okay, now God is to be conceived only in this way, God is to be pursued only in this way. Not like that. At the same time, bhakti also involves certain practices. So, now in different traditions, the practices may be different, but those practices need to be followed. Whichever, if I am going to, if say one path up a mountain might be rocky, another path might be a little marshy, another path might expose us to maybe rivers and puddle rivers and streams and other things. So now each path, when we go up, we will need a certain set of equipment, we'll need a certain set of skills to go up that path, and we need to adopt that. Once we adopt that, we'll start moving up. So this does not put the various paths intrinsically in competition. They are all ultimately meant for that one purpose of raising human consciousness. Now, whether all paths will necessarily lead everyone to higher consciousness, whether all paths are equally accessible, equally transformative, those are different questions. And those have to be individually explored. But in principle, spirituality, bhakti is spiritual because it talks about transformation of consciousness, because it talks about raising human consciousness from love of the mundane to the love of the divine. Bhakti is not religious in the sense that it does not reject. It says all of humanity has the potential to love divinity. It acknowledges that humanity may express that love for divinity in different ways, may aspire and progress to a divinity in different ways. So in that sense, it's not religious. But in another sense, it's religious in that if we want to rise up the mountain, we need to follow a specific path. And in following a specific path, we need certain specific practices. So that's why the practitioners of bhakti yoga can seem religious. There are certain mantras we chant. There are certain specific texts we read. There are certain kinds of food we eat. There are certain kind of external marks of devotion that we have. So these are in correspondence with the specific path we are pursuing. But that does not mean this is the only path. That does not mean that other paths are rejected. That does not mean that this is exclusivist. The idea is that we all are pursuing one purpose. And that's why, going back to the verse with which I started, pratyaksha-vagamam dharmyam, that we need to experience the divine, practically experience the divine. And when we experience the divine, then susukham, that will be the ultimately fulfilling experience in reality. And then that is what we will find contentment in. So, to summarize, I discussed today, is bhakti spiritual or religious? And first I started by talking about, okay, what do we mean by these terms? So spirituality in one sense, so religion I talked about, and we have religion often offers two things. There are dogmas, this is what you should believe, and there are rituals, this is what you should do. And then often that can be quite polarizing, sectarian, because religions tend to otherify or portray negatively anyone who does not have the same set of dogmas and rituals. And that's what puts many people off religion. And as I said, religion can paraphrase much conventional religions, pay, pray, obey. Spirituality, on the other hand, is about experiencing higher reality. And it is not just a state of mind, but a state of being. So spirituality has two limbs, just as science has theory and experiment, spirituality has philosophy and religion. Philosophy gives us a reasoned, a rational understanding or a rational proposition of the nature of reality. And religion is not just a set of rituals, it's a set of practices which enable us to experience the reality that has been proposed by the philosophy. So we could say philosophy tells us what is at the top of the mountain, and religion provides us the path to go up the mountain. So Bhakti Yoga is inclusivist in the sense that it accepts that all of humanity has the potential to love divinity. All of humanity can aspire to love divinity in different ways. But at the same time, to actually move on the spiritual journey, one has to commit to a particular path. So in that sense, Bhakti Yoga is not religious in the sense of being narrow-minded or exclusivist. It is inclusivist and it is broad-minded. But Bhakti Yoga is religious in the sense that it entails committing to a particular path and adopting a set of practices for elevating our consciousness. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any reflections, questions, comments? Yes, Rajaraman.
Bro, I was just clapping the way the analogy that you gave on the religiosity part of it, right? Pray, pay, and obey, and this whole mountain, it just blew my mind. So I'll just stay quiet, Prabhu. I'll let others speak about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody have any questions or comments? Prabhu, actually, I wanted to share one letter from Prabhupada, which talks a little bit about religion and spirituality. Can I share that? Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Let me see if I can share my screen. This is more as a reflection more than anything else.
Sure,
it's a famous letter. I'm sure you must have seen this one, but maybe for some other people who may not have seen this. So this was written by Prabhupada in 1968, and he was writing to the Governor General of Canada. And he's talking about the ISKCON Society, which at that point in time was the only, pretty much, probably the only Bhakti Yoga society in Canada and probably in the Western Hemisphere as well. So he says, ISKCON is a non-lucrative organization whose purpose is to promote the well-being of human society by drawing its attention to God. We are a non-sectarian society, and our members include people from Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, as well as Hindu faiths. So like different faiths. The aim of ISKCON is not to found a new religious sect, but to invoke the living entity's dormant love of God, and thus provide the human society of all faiths with a common platform of clear theistic knowledge and practice. Members of ISKCON may retain their own respective religious faiths, as ISKCON is meant to establish a clear, practical, common formulation of the common ideals of all theists, and to defeat the unnecessary dogmatic wranglings that now divide and invade the theistic camp. This common ideal of theism is to develop love of God. So I thought it was very similar to kind of the same themes you were talking about. So I thought it was an interesting that Prabhupada was talking about this in 1968 in this letter. So this was his very mood, like this inclusive spirituality, right in like 1968, just when he kind of founded the Bhakti Yoga Society in the West. So I don't know if you have any reflections on that, but your talk reminded me of this letter which I'd read of Prabhupada. So.
Thank you for sharing. This is extremely apt for our discussion. And Prabhupada is using strong words. They defeat the unnecessary dogmatic wranglings that now, not just divide, it says divide and invalidate the theistic camp.
Yeah.
Invalidate is a strong word, especially in America and in the Western world at large. Among the largest or the fastest growing religious denomination, if you can call it that, when people are asked about what is their religious denomination, a common denomination is none.
All right.
I just don't belong to it. Now, one reason for that is that people just feel that religion causes more problems than it solves. That you guys, you quarrel about the nature of the other world and you create trouble in this world. So better have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just divide, it divides internally, but for the remaining world, it just invalidates. I don't care for you at all. So that's one of the reasons that people feel that I don't want to be religious. I don't want to be involved in this religious business at all. But then what he says is a clear, practical, common formulation of the common ideal of all theists. Now, this common ideal doesn't necessarily have to be in conformity with the beliefs or the rituals of any one particular religion. It is more about the values and the aspirations. The specifics will vary, but the values and aspirations can be remarkably similar. As Prabhupada said, that is to develop love of God, love of divinity. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, and maybe I'll pose a question to you, and and maybe we can have a discussion. Others can chime in as well, but maybe we can hear your thoughts, Prabhu, first. I think it's a question of, we have some people on the call, and then across the country and across the world as well, who come from Jewish background or Muslim background and a Christian background. And Prabhupada over here is indicating that they can keep their religious faith and still follow the bhakti yoga path. So maybe this is more of a question of how can someone, and I'm Prabhupada is saying there's a way they can, but how does someone retain their Catholic upbringing or their Jewish upbringing and their Muslim upbringing, their Christian identity, and still follow the path of Lord Chaitanya? How do they chant Hare Krishna and still do namaz? I don't know if you have, or they still follow Lent and still follow the practices of bhakti yoga. They still do Kartik Vrat and still follow the Kartik Vrat. I don't know if you have any kind of reconciliation of that, and we can have a discussion because we have people from different faiths who have taken up the process of bhakti yoga over here. So
that's a good question, Ashwin. And I was thinking about this too, because I was raised very strict Baptist Christian. And since I've been on the path of bhakti, it's made me understand the entity of Jesus Christ a little bit better. And so when I was baptized, when I was young, I didn't really understand the full meaning of, being saved. But now that I've been on the path of bhakti, I completely understand, that he's an entity that would save me if I were to be going to hell, if I would repent my sins. And so it's really tied into some of those characters in the Bible to me. And I could be completely off, but that's the realizations that I had when I started this path. That is, there was an analogy about Jesus Christ where, they were comparing the spiritual master and Jesus Christ being the spiritual master of Christians. And, we were talking about, we want to act in a way that doesn't cause harm or embarrassment to the spiritual master. But then when you look at it with Christians, they don't really compare. It's not the same. They see that they're doing sinning. And then instead of saying, we don't want to embarrass and or, hurt that person or entity, they're just like, I'm saved. And they continue to do so. And so that hit me as a realization, that's a real, that's your spiritual master in this whole religion. And so, I think it tied into a lot of the stories that I was raised on. And it just made me understand, those pastimes really, because when I was raised, I didn't understand the stories of the Bibles as pastimes. And now I completely understand the Bibles and the stories in the Bibles as pastimes. And so that's my input in there. I don't know if I really say I would follow it though. I follow more of this path of bhakti now, but I do completely validate a lot of the pastimes that are in there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. So it's a beautiful personal experience. My understanding of Prabhupada's statement is that it's at two levels. Like I talked about going up the mountain. at one level, Prabhupada wants everyone to rise towards spiritual consciousness. And in that sense, there are letters where he says, if somebody reads the Bhagavad Gita, if a Christian reads the Bhagavad Gita, they can become a better Christian. Now, how is that possible? Now, there are universal principles for spiritual living that are taught in the Bhagavad Gita. And those can inspire a person to become a better Christian. So in that sense, the Bhagavad Gita gives some universal insights that can help anyone on any path become more inspired and more guided to go up that path. So in that sense, one can retain one's own religion. Now we say it's our own religion, but it's also true that it's not exactly our own religion, because it's the religion in which we were born or which we later adopted. And it's a part of what we have in this life. If we understand that we are spiritual beings who are on a multi-life journey of spiritual evolution, so the religion of this birth or this life need not necessarily have anything to do with our eternal spiritual essence. Nonetheless, since that's how one may be inspired to go up further, and that so everybody can retain their own religion of birth. Now, having said that, Prabhupada, based on his personal conviction, based on his personal realization, also felt that the path given by Lord Chaitanya, the path given based on the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhakti tradition, that offers the most accessible and relishable way up the mountain. The journey is the same, and every tradition has a right to have that belief that our path offers, I won't use the word best, because when we say the best, it means superior to others. But every tradition can have that conviction that this is the path that will help me reach God most expeditiously. And that is fine. Now, Prabhupada could give reasons for that. He talked about the potency of the holy name. He talked about the clarity of the understanding of God, who God is as a person. We want to love God. If we don't know God, it's difficult to love him. So there are aspects of the path of Bhakti Yoga which are additional strengths. So in that sense, it was that if a person is not committed to any particular path, somebody is just a nominal follower of a particular path. One of my friends was born in a Jew family, and then he became introduced to Bhakti, started practicing Bhakti, and he started sharing his Bhakti with his friends, with his relatives, family relatives. And his uncle became very suspicious. He says, "Are you trying to convert me?" He said, "I didn't know that you belong to your religion. I thought you were an atheist." He says, "I'm a Jew atheist." Now, what does a Jew atheist mean? The first commandment, the most important commandment, is to love God. If one doesn't even accept the existence of God, then what has happened is Jew is no longer the marker of one's spiritual commitment or religious affiliation. It has just become a mundane designation, a mundane demographic or ethnic designation. So then that is bankrupt or bereft of any spirituality. So if somebody were like that, and we're not really practicing any path, then Prabhupada would personally recommend the path of bhakti as revealed in the Gaudiya tradition, as revealed in the Bhakti tradition coming from Mahaprabhu. So that's the two level. Can somebody practice love or progress toward love of God by following the path of their own religion? Yes, they can. So in that sense, our primary purpose is not to get people to follow our path. Our primary purpose is to inspire people to raise their consciousness from the material level to the spiritual level, to begin the trek to the top of the mountain. And if they are not particularly committed to any specific path, then based on our conviction, our realization, we recommend this path. And we can offer support systems for this path. So that's how we can understand this. Now, can somebody, now I'm going right now after here, from here I'm going to Utah, and there is a Christian priest, a Catholic preacher, who is also who chants Hare Krishna. He chants 16 rounds. Now he's planning to take initiation, but he's a Catholic preacher. He says that, that's what I do, and it's not that he's secretly trying to infiltrate Krishna conscious teachings into Catholicism, but he feels that this has helped me become a better human being, a more spiritual person, and I can focus on more of the spiritual teachings within Catholicism and share those through my talks. Now he's a rare person. He's already committed to a particular path, and yet he felt inspired by another path. So he says that the audience that I'm reaching, I don't want to disrupt their faith. So I already have an audience, and they have committed to a particular path. I inspire them to follow Catholicism in a more spiritual way. At the same time, for my personal practices, I am also chanting Hare Krishna. I'm also worshipping Krishna. So individuals may find out their own balance of how to balance the path of one's birth and the path of one's, we could say, preference, or the path which inspires or transforms one's the most. So that is something individual. Does it answer the question broadly?
Yes. That's yeah, definitely. I wonder if anybody else wants to also have a reflection or has a follow-up question or any other question. But I know, because like some people coming from a different, like a non-Hindu background, like this question comes up sometimes. So I thought, we get your view on this.
Certainly.
Yeah, or any other question, or any other reflections or anything.
I'll say one more.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I really enjoyed, this is a reflection, but I really enjoyed, you explaining spirituality as being experiences. And so, because I wasn't thinking that before. So that kind of opened my mind to a new way of thinking about spirituality. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Happy to be of service. The experiential part of spirituality also gels very well with the postmodern ethos, where people focus more on experience. I want to experience, I want to try it out. And in that sense, bhakti is not just traditional, bhakti is not just ancient. You could say bhakti has a postmodern aspect to it. And it's not just a matter of contemporary appeal. In one of the bhakti texts, it's called Brihad Bhagavatam, it says that the ultimate test of any path, any proposition, any practice is experience, anubhav. It is in the experience of our heart that whatever we are practicing is vindicated. So it is also it's a theological tenet of bhakti. Thank you. Anyone else like to ask something or speak something? Any comments? Anything that struck you? Anything you feel you'll be taking home to this talk?
Hi, can you hear me?
You can hear many use.
Sorry, I forgot that my partner and I are on the call at the same time in the same room. Don't ask me why. But I really enjoyed your lecture. And I think just like Bree, I was raised Christian with a Christian background. And yeah, like hearing the explanation of how bhakti can actually strengthen your own, a different religion, or strengthen your own bhakti practice, like through, being a Hindu or whatever, is just like super helpful for me to hear. But I was going to ask a question, and I don't know if this is totally off topic, but I just have been wondering a lot lately about the role of guilt and shame relates to bhakti, and like whether Krishna talks about in the Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, and just like how that may impede or, strengthen our bhakti practice.
If I understand it, you're asking about guilt and shame?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. In the bhakti tradition, there are said to be multiple levels at which one may be inspired or impelled to approach the divine. So we could call them as fear, desire, duty, and love. So love is the aspiration ultimately. But at the level of fear, oh, if you do not become spiritual, if you don't love God, if you don't obey God, you will suffer. You may go to hell. So that is fear. Then there is desire. Oh, if I worship God, God will give me all the good things in life. I'll fulfill my desires. I'll have a great house, a great job, a great family, things like that. Then duty is where we understand that actually God has already provided me so much. My very existence is dependent on Him. The air I breathe, I don't manufacture it myself. There's so much He has given me. Therefore, it's my duty to serve. And then ultimately is love, where we love God not because what He will do to us or what He will give us or what He has given us, but because of who that ultimate divinity is. We love God for God's sake, because God is so lovable. That is the level of love. So ultimately, various religious traditions are meant to take us towards the level of love. However, getting to the level of love is difficult. And at a practical level, many religious traditions stay at the level of fear and desire. If you do good, God will reward you. If you do bad, God will punish you. And one aspect of that fear-driven religion is to use, so one is guilt, and you could say shame with it. The idea is that many times people are guilted into doing the right thing, or guilted into doing what a particular tradition thinks is the right thing. So that can be psychologically manipulated, and that can, so living under the burden of too much guilt. Oh, you did such terrible things. You are such a terrible person. You have no hope unless you do this, accept this as a savior. Or that can be psychologically both manipulative and damaging. So that's why the idea of guilt and shame, I'll explain the difference as I understand it a little later, but that has a lot of bad rep. Having said that, the guilt itself is not intrinsically a bad thing. Basically, we could say guilt is like a psychological compass, or it is meant to be a psychological compass. When we do something which is wrong, then we are prompted from within, hey, I should not be doing this. And in that sense, it deters us from doing something wrong and inspires us to do something good. Now, just to, let's take it the other extreme. We may say, oh, guilt is all manipulative or a controlling tool. It could be, but let's consider people who have no inner compass, people who have no sense of guilt or any moral compunction on doing something wrong. Now, who are such people? No, such people are sociopaths and psychopaths. They can just remorselessly go and brutalize and victimize and kill people, and they feel nothing wrong about it. And if because they don't feel anything wrong about the wrong things they do, we recognize that there is something seriously wrong with them. So an utter absence of an inner compass, an inner indicator that something is wrong, that is dangerous. But making people feel that they are doing something wrong and guilting them and controlling, that's also bad. So the idea is, we all need an inner compass, and external social systems, whether it be religion, whether it be wisdom traditions, whether it be cultural practices, they are all meant to help us sharpen, refine our inner compass, our inner sense of what is right and what is wrong. And when that is there, then guilt will actually protect us from violating our own values. Now, when I say our own values, what I mean by this is not a license for complete subjectivity. That it just means that we all have some sense of right and wrong. And to the extent we live at least according to our own values, to that extent we can authentically respect ourselves. Now, low self-esteem can have many reasons. One is if we are just surrounded by people who are far better than us in particular areas, we feel badly about it. But a far more damaging cause of low self-esteem is when we don't live according to the values that we ourselves hold sacred, that we all ourselves cherish. So if I believe that I need to be polite with others, and then I am rude with others, then what happens is I fall down, not in some religion's eyes, not in some pastor's eyes, but in my own eyes. And that is the most damaging cause of low self-esteem. So in one sense, guilt can actually deter us from doing the action that will make us fall down in our own eyes. So in the bhakti tradition, this is called as vivek buddhi. Buddhi is intelligence, but vivek is, we could say, moral discernment. So like a moral intelligence. Intelligence can be technical intelligence. How do I fix this phone? How do I build this house? That's intelligence. But moral intelligence means to be able to reason. This is right, this is wrong. So that is an integral part of our inner compass. But generally, in the bhakti tradition, the level of fear is acknowledged as useful at some level. But the bhakti tradition is focused more on progressing toward the level of love. And that's why the center is understanding how lovable divinity is and connecting with people who love the divine. And that's how the love within us for the divine is also inspired, is also activated, even if that may not be as strong as it might be in some other people, some others who are more spiritually evolved, but still it is there. So yes, guilt could be destructive, guilt could be constructive. Guilt could be constructive, it is destructive, it is used to manipulate others. Guilt could be constructive if it becomes our own moral compass, or you could say moral check and balance system. But ultimately, bhakti is not so much about not doing something wrong because it is wrong. It is more about doing the right thing because the right thing is so lovable. Because the divine is so loving and lovable, and harmonizing our actions so that they are expressions of love for the divine, so that they are expressions of service to the divine in the world. That is the way we choose bhakti voluntarily, joyfully, not out of fear or guilt. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that did. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And I'm glad this is recorded because I may need to listen to this again just to remind myself when I forget. But thank you.
I just saw a comment that sometimes when we are not able to chant, what does it about it? Using guilt as inner compass. We feel super guilty, shameful when I do things like not chant. Yeah, now the point is that could be one way in which we can be inspired to chant. And that's not the healthiest way, but you say, okay, anyway is good. But that should not be the primary thing. So I know one devotee friend of mine, the early days, he was very enthusiastic about practicing bhakti, about coming to programs, asking questions, even chanting. And then he just stopped everything. And he's just like you say, am I, where did it disappear? Just missing in action. Then after a few months, I chanced across him and asked him, how are you? What happened? And slowly started sharing. He said that he was chanting regularly. A few days, somehow he was just so busy he couldn't chant. And he felt that if I again come in the association of devotees, the first thing that everyone is going to ask is, are you chanting? How many rounds are you chanting? He said, I feel so embarrassed by that. I just decided to drop out of everything. So that whether that acts constructively or destructively, that is something which the individual and the community have to have a delicate dynamic over there. So we would much rather chant because chanting helps us, if not feel peaceful, at least become purified, at least become more in harmony with our essential nature. Thank you. Yes, Miguel, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, first of all, I needed to hear that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because for as enthusiastic as this group is, this speaking personally, sometimes we slip up, right? But knowing that the community is just loving and accepting, regardless of what happens along our path, it's quite encouraging.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I did have one question, and I've been thinking about this for a little bit and just having trouble articulating. So I started typing, and it was like half of it there. But anyway, so if you wouldn't mind helping us understand the relationship between almost willingly making the wrong choices, and how does that tie to our karmic predicament, in the sense of, yes, we are all here burning karma, but shouldn't we, like, I'm still like half-baked with this
Okay,
question.
let me try to articulate it.
Please.
And then you can tell me whether I got it. So we, in one sense, are told that we are responsible for our choices and that we should choose rightly, choose wisely. But at the same time, based on our past karma, aren't we in a condition where even our capacity to choose is highly eroded, if not almost entirely eliminated?
Yes,
So
it's almost like it's beyond our control. Yeah.
So when we do something wrong, is it that we just can't help it? Yes, this is it's a fairly common and a fairly serious question. Whenever somebody asks me, do we have free will? So I usually answer, do I have the free will to not answer this question? Because it can be a very complex question. So let me start with some terms which I'll differentiate between. There is free will and there is freedom. So let's consider a person in a jail. They did some crime and they are in jail now. Does the person in the jail have freedom?
Finding about Gauranga Prabhu's meeting. So you'll be there by 7?
Brajaraman Prabhu, can you just mute yourself? Yeah. So does a person in the jail have freedom? Well, not exactly. They may have a little freedom, but if they're in solitary confinement or then something like that, they have practically no freedom. But does the person in the jail have free will? Yes, they have free will. In the jail, that person can choose whether to fight with the other prisoners. That person can choose maybe to do some constructive work. Sometimes people even complete their education or get some additional qualifications while they are in prison. And then they come out and they have a better life. So basically, free will and freedom are two different things. Free will is never lost. But when freedom is lost, that means the external area over which we can exercise our free will is lost or has become highly limited. Okay? So this is free will and freedom. Now let me bring in a third term over here, that is willpower. So willpower and free will are not the same thing. Just as freedom is the external area over which we can exercise our free will, willpower is the internal area over which we can exercise our free will. So that is also different for different people. Suppose somebody is an addict, maybe an alcohol addict or a drug addict. Now, in many ways, they have practically no willpower to resist whenever the urge to drink or to do drugs hits them. So they don't have much willpower. But do they have free will? Well, yes, in the sense that they can desire, at least desire, I don't want to be addicted like this. Or they can just say, this is just the way I am, and I'm not even going to do anything about changing. I'm not even going to desire to change it. So, in some ways, just as by our past actions, some people's freedom may be curtailed when they have, say, put in the jail. Similarly, for some people, their willpower may be curtailed in some areas because of their previous actions. But even when the willpower is curtailed, the free will is not lost. So what can we do in such a situation if we are in a particular situation like this? So the idea is that this willpower is not in the same level of dwindling, or it's just not generally not the same level in all areas. So that means, say, an alcoholic may not be able to resist the urge for drinking when that urge comes up. But suppose that person is a parent and they have a child, and the child cries for food. Then even the alcoholic, when they are not driven by alcohol, at that time they do have that choice. Now, will I just lie in bed and feel sorry for myself? Or will I get up and prepare some food for my child? So we could say that maybe the urge to take alcohol hits every 6 hours. But what about in between the 6 hours? So we all have certain urges, and sometimes the urges have surges. So the urges can sometimes become very strong, and we may just not be able to control what we do when the urges have their surges. But the point is, so in that situation, we can say that person just has no willpower. But then, if we consider a graph of time, these urges have their surges intermittently, not constantly. Even the most addicted drug addict, it's not that they are craving for drugs at the same level of intensity 24 hours a day. So what happens is, we may not be able to control the urges when they are at a surge. We may not be able to do anything at that time. But in between the surges, we can choose our actions. So the way I write this, I write on the Gita every day, Gita daily. I'll send a link to an article which I wrote on this topic. Even if we can't resist our urges, we can persist between our urges. So that is where free will is still there for us. And that not only free will is there, the capacity to exercise the free will is there. Free will is always there. But the capacity to exercise the free will is there. And as we leverage that, as we start acting more and more in between the urges, what will happen is willpower is also like a muscle. We may have no capacity, that muscle may be completely incapacitated in one area. Like for some people, what happens is they have some muscular injury, just can't move their arm backward. As soon as they try to, it's such unbearable pain, they can't do it. But just because they can't move their hand backward doesn't mean that they can't do anything with their hands. Maybe like this, they can even lift things. So like that, we all may have certain karmic limitations from our past actions, by which certain areas we may seem to have no willpower. But that does not mean we have no free will. We still have free will, and we still have some willpower in some other areas. Unfortunately, what we do is that we often rate our willpower based on the areas we are the weakest in. And then we think, I am just worthless. I'm good for nothing. I'm doomed. Well, yes, in the areas where our willpower is weakest, we need to be cautious. We need to be aware. But we need to be focused more on the areas where our willpower is stronger. And then as we use that, it's like the more I use my hand, I can do things. And who knows, maybe as I move my hand slowly, gradually I may be able to move it backward also. So this, as we use the muscles, they become better. So that way we can all increase our willpower. So I wouldn't give a like a 0-1 answer. Can there be situations where we do something wrong because we are just conditioned, constrained, controlled to do that? Yes, there can be. But that does not mean that everything in our life is like that. So there are areas where we can work, and as we work on the areas where we can do the right thing, gradually those areas will increase because our willpower will increase. The muscle which we use for exercising our free will become stronger. And therein lies our hope for transformation. Now, having said this, there are two things. So this, we could say, is simply an analytical process based on repetition. But bhakti can do two things. Bhakti can actually, by God's grace, decrease the power of the urges itself. So when we start practicing bhakti, we get some higher experience. Then the urge itself may disappear, or the surge may become far less strong, far weaker, and it become much more bearable. So that's one thing that bhakti can do. So in that sense, we are not just struggling alone, we are gaining higher assistance. And another thing that bhakti can do is that, so by the practice of bhakti, there is the transformation that will happen gradually, but dramatically. So like many of us, some of us, we had particular dietary choices. Most of us as bhakti practitioners, we don't eat meat. Some of us used to eat meat, and some of us may at that time earlier felt, I just can't give up meat. But we started practicing bhakti, and just the urge disappeared. I don't need this. It is no need for willpower. I feel like eating, I feel a craving, but I'm not going to eat it. No, it just disappeared. So that's you could say, the magical transformative power of bhakti. That happens by divine grace. But even when that doesn't happen, bhakti does one more thing. Bhakti connects us with the divine. And the divine can be like a very strong, or the supremely strong anchor. I'll take another metaphor to explain this point. And this is what Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, that when our conditionings rise, if we're practicing bhakti firmly, then we will not be overcome by our conditionings. He says in 14:26 in the Gita. So the metaphor we could use is that suppose we are in an ocean, And at that time, waves hit us. In an ocean, waves are inevitable. But sometimes the waves may be giant. Now, when a giant wave comes along, no matter how much strength we have physically, we can't stop the wave. We can't even stop ourselves from being swept away by the wave. So sometimes our urges are like that. When they come, they just sweep us away. However, at that time, if we are fortunate enough to find an anchor, maybe a strong anchor, and then we exercise whatever strength we have in holding on to that anchor, then the waves may still hit us and the waves may still fling us. But if we can hold on to the anchor, the waves won't fling us away. We'll come back. So in the bhakti, what it does is that it gives us that anchor. So when some urge hits us, we can chant the holy names. We can recite some wisdom verses. We can remember some philosophy. We can pray. Through whichever way we find, we try to hold on to the divine. We hold on to the divine. What will happen is that we won't be swept away. And that way, bhakti gives us that anchor, that ultimate unshakable anchor. So we could say that our capacity to use our free will is in this way increased far more by the practice of bhakti. So these two things are where our hope for transformation exists, and that hope is multiplied or magnified by bhakti. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, Prabhu, and like I mentioned before, I really needed to hear that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy to be of service.
So, Rajman Prabhu, should we stop here since it's Prabhu has prepared for his next class, right?
Yeah, I do believe yes. Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining today, and thank you for your thoughtful questions and thoughtful participation overall. All the best for your spiritual journey. And I pray that Krishna reveals his attractiveness, his supreme attractiveness in various ways and helps you march toward him. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, and thank you for taking time out for us. We appreciate it very much. Rajman Prabhu, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. Good, Rashmi Prabhu.
Yes, no, I know. I was just going to say, no, thank you so much, Prabhu. We've been eagerly waiting for this. We've had some discussions within the group, and I think everyone enjoyed, your talk and the questions. And I think everyone's going to go and listen to the recording, especially of the last couple of answers for sure. And maybe we'll discuss it again next week when we meet. We'll kind of listen to the recording and do some reflections and discussion on that for sure.
Happy to be of service. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Is everyone okay to take a photo shot among the gallery here? If you want to turn on your camera, again, no force. I'll just looking at Makai Prabhu. I know you can turn on. Here that comes.
All right. Maybe we'll give 30 seconds to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Just give it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.